Welcome to Propaganda Loves You, the show that asks and answers the question, what is civil commitment and why is it making a comeback? I'm your host for this week, Kodie, joined by Arthur and Joe.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Hello, and welcome back to Propaganda Loves You. This week, our main focus is going to be on the Trump and Epstein controversy. We talked a little bit about that last week in our episode on Thursday, but this week, we kind of want to deep dive this and really focusing in on the different narratives that are coming out from the Trump administration around this, just how quickly the narrative has changed and how much they're kind of like throwing at the wall, trying to see what could stick, what can distract from that story, and doesn't seem to be right now. The most recent being, I think, the going back to President Obama, the greatest hits and blaming Obama and saying essentially that Obama tried to create a coup or has been running like a years-long coup as the most recent story. So that'll be like kind of the main thing that we talk about today going into that. But before we kind of get into that, I did have one thing that I want to read up, but also wanted to check in with my co-hosts, Joe and Arthur. How are you guys doing this week? Anything you want to bring up this week before we kind of get into all of the other craziness that we've seen?
I just got personal house hell continued. They found like we had like a water leak under the floor, and so they had to like dry it, and it's just such an insurance scam. But it's going to be like no kitchen or downstairs for like more than a month. So kind of like living in like a compact space, trying to MacGyver a bunch of kitchen tools together and stuff. So just a little hectic here, and a lot of fan noise in the background.
We've had a lot of rain sporadically the last few weeks, and we've got a leak in our basement that started coming out. We're trying to figure it out with insurance. Like, we have homeowners insurance to see if they could cover it. And they're like, oh, it's natural water. It's not like from a pipe or anything. I was like, why? And they're like, we don't do that. You need a separate insurance plan for that.
God, it's such a scam.
We're not technically in a flood zone, but, climate change is moving all the flood zones, and more places are flooding more and more and more. And so all the old flood zone maps are out of date, and insurance is just all too happy to keep excluding themselves from things like that. It's just our basement, though, not our kitchen or anything.
Still sucks.
Yeah, it sucks, but we'll figure it out. I probably have to dig a French drain in the backyard or something to move all the water away, which will be fun.
Man, that's no fun. I hate water issues. Makes me think about the insurance industry in general, like all facets of the insurance industry, but like in Florida and places that are getting hit more and more by climate change, how they're basically just pulling out of these areas. And it's like, okay, well, what's the point of insurance if it's not actually going to serve people that are going to need it? It's like, oh, that just like solidifies it. They're not going to cover people that they know are going to lose them money, right? The whole thing just feels scammy and bad.
What do you think the first insurance company that ever started, what that conversation was like? Like, hey guys, I got this killer idea. You know how people just need help all the time? We could make them pay us every month so that like when they need it, we could help them. But then we could have like a really strict contract and like find ways to get out. I don't know, just that conversation, that idea, setting it up. I can't imagine anything good about it. It just sounds slimy.
You're saying that it made me think of like, oh, this feels like an old school like protection racket. It's like the mob guy comes in, he's like, just pay me $50 a month. That's it. If anyone comes by, unless they're too big and scary, we'll take care of you.
Exactly.
Oh, man.
That's pretty funny. I read that only like 5 to 6% of insured homeowners file a claim like each year. I think that's what they bet on too, is like, because I don't know, I was curious how this is so profitable, because I pay like, X, but now I'm going to recoup 30 times that, maybe, who knows, if they want to pay for it. But I was just curious. So I looked into the statistics, and it's like nobody's actually filing.
Yeah.
Everybody should file.
Well, how many times, I don't know if you guys have heard this, like I think my parents have said this to me before or something, but it's like, you get a fender bender or something like that. And the question is like, oh, are you going to go up your insurance? It's like, no, I'm not going to put this in insurance because like then my insurance goes up. Right. So it's like, just to pay out of pocket for this thing. It's like, huh, wait a minute. So you're afraid to
Yeah.
use this thing. Yeah,
They must have been creating that stigma early.
Yeah, like
definitely.
all kinds of
Yeah.
ways that the rates get adjusted. If you're a slightly riskier driver, you got to pay more. Like your insurance costs go down when you turn 25 just by default, right? And I think statistically, women are safer drivers and are charged less. I don't know if I might need to fact check that, but I think I remember hearing that at some point anyway. How weird is that? That like they get us into an agreement, we pay them every month, and then they just bank on the fact that most people will never use it. And so they got a free paycheck
Yeah.
every month. And then like in
Yeah.
Florida, when stuff gets really bad and people start filing claims more and more, they're like, oh, actually, we're moving out of this area. It's not worth it for
Yeah.
us anymore.
Yeah. But you have to have insurance, right? It's like mandated for a
Oh,
lot
that's
of
the
things like
law.
driving a car.
Yeah.
You must have insurance, right?
Thanks, Obama,
Yeah.
with the healthcare. Me and Katie are actually figuring that out right now. We're trying to sign up with this direct primary care place that doesn't take insurance. It's like a small private practice, but you pay a monthly membership fee, and then they have all kinds of normal healthcare checkup things included for free and discounts on specialists and stuff like that. So it's like an alternative medical that seems interesting and is a lot cheaper than paying one of the big insurance companies $1,000 a month with a $15,000 deductible or whatever the hell it is these days.
Did you say it was like a co-op or what was it called?
I think the business model they call direct primary care. If you just look up like direct primary care, there are a handful of them around the DC area. So we just found one that looked good to us and started making calls.
Interesting. That sounds cool. Yeah. I was just thinking like maybe insurance is also one of those areas that could benefit from some nationalization and not as a nonprofit functionality, just like, not a profit center. Who knows? Anyway. Please stay tuned for a word from our sponsors. At Truth AI, we believe words matter, and so does your quarterly report. That's why we built the Language Harmony module, our most advanced euphemism engine to date.
We convert mass raids into community support interventions, camps into structured opportunity zones, and forced removal into the Freedom Relocation Protocol.
From the creators of Bias Filter and Narrative Sync, our models are already helping governments, corporations, and friendly media reframe violence as logistics.
Because when you're profiting from pain, every syllable counts. And with Truth AI, you can lie beautifully in over 140 languages.
Truth AI is not responsible for moral injury, historical revisionism, or public backlash. All terms sanitized for investor comfort. Well, before we get into our main topics for today, I did want to read through a new executive order that came out from the White House. This came out on July 24th, so 2 days ago. We're recording this on the 26th. And the reason I wanted to read through this and get your guys' reactions is because, we've talked a lot on this show about how crime can be used as a justification for violence. And also, we are also the ones defining what crime is, right? And so this specific executive order is called Ending Crime and Disorder on America's Streets. And actually, I'm pretty sure, Arthur, you said like you guys had something similar in your area, right?
It
That's what we're
says,
talking about.
keep our violent criminals off our streets.
That's right.
And of course, they're both going to do exactly what they say, right?
Yeah, definitely. Right. Yeah. So let me read through this and then we can get your guys' thoughts on this order and what it could mean here. Okay, so by the authority vested in me as president by the Constitution and laws of the United States of America, it is hereby ordered. So Section 1, purpose and policy, endemic vagrancy, disorderly behavior, sudden confrontations, and violent attacks have made our cities unsafe. The number of individuals living on the streets in the United States on a single night during the last year of the previous administration was 274,224. The highest ever recorded. I just want to pause for a second. Like that's a very specific number. I kind of want to figure out like where that number
Have I
came
mentioned
from.
this before? How they do the homeless count? I feel like
No, I don't.
I thought I'd mentioned
I
this
don't
in an
know.
older episode, but every year I think it's HUD, Housing Urban Development, they run It's called a point in time count, a PIT count. And they do it every year on the same day, I think in January. They pick an extremely cold time of year to do it in. And they have a host of people that they hire to walk around municipal areas and literally count how many unhoused people they can find and try to get an actual count. But they pick one of the coldest moments of the year to do that in, which deliberately lowers the count because people are going to find abandoned houses and buildings to shelter in when it's cold. They're not going to be out there on the
Right.
street. So the count is deliberately skewed lower because they pick a freezing. You think about Chicago in January, right? Like
Yeah.
if you're an unhoused person, you're not just going to be sitting out in the open, right?
Yeah.
That's where those numbers come from. Every year, maybe every 2 years, they do a point in time count. That's where that comes from.
Interesting. Okay. No, that's good to know. Okay. So moving forward to the highest ever recorded, blah, blah, blah. Okay. The overwhelming majority of these individuals are addicted to drugs, have a mental health condition, or both. Nearly 2/3 of homeless individuals report having regularly used hard drugs like methamphetamines, cocaine, or opioids in their lifetime. An equally large share of homeless individuals reported suffering from mental health conditions. The federal government and the states have spent tens of billions of dollars on failed programs that address homelessness, but not its root causes, leaving other citizens vulnerable to public safety threats. Shifting homeless individuals into long-term institutional settings for humane treatment through the appropriate use of civil commitment will restore public order. Surrendering our cities and citizens to disorder and fear is neither compassionate to the homeless nor other citizens. My administration will take a new approach focused on protecting public safety. So there's a couple more sections here, but any thoughts just on that statement first before we go on? Because I definitely have a thought on that one.
Does it say, you mentioned one of the statements that it doesn't address the root cause. Does executive order define the root cause of homelessness, just out of curiosity?
That's a good question. I read through this before. I don't think it actually does, honestly. I'll go through the rest of this, but honestly, the rest of this talks about what they're going to do, vice like what any actual root cause is. It just says we don't address the root cause, which I agree with.
Convenient.
Maybe that's not a wrong.
Convenient to leave it undefined. But yeah, I just
Right.
thought that one sentence in particular was really sinister. Maybe you could read it again. The one that had institution in it.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll read from that part down through that. So it said the federal government and the states have spent tens of billions of dollars on failed programs that address homelessness, but not its root causes, leaving other citizens vulnerable to public safety threats. And then it says shifting homeless individuals into long-term institutional settings for humane treatment through the appropriate use of civil commitment will restore public order.
That sounds
So,
like slavery with
I mean,
extra
actu-
words to me. I'm just going to say that that's my take.
Yeah. And the thing that, like, if that's kind of what they're saying, like, yeah, they say right before that we never address the root causes, but then it says we're going to put homeless people into long-term institutional settings for humane treatment and use civil commitment to restore public order. Again, I don't think that's addressing any root cause. That's just taking the symptom and taking these people and putting them in some, new institution or something like that. It has nothing to do with root cause of why people are actually homeless in the first place. Yeah. That's just section 1. Okay, section 2 is called Restoring Civil Commitment. The Attorney General, in consultation with the Secretary of Health and Human Services, shall take appropriate action to 1. Seek in appropriate cases the reversal of federal or state judicial precedents and the termination of consent decrees that impede the United States policy of encouraging civil commitments of individuals with mental illness who pose risks to themselves or the public or are living on the streets and cannot care for themselves in appropriate facilities for appropriate periods of time. And 2, it will provide assistance to state and local governments through technical guidance grants or other legally available means for identification, adoption, and implementation of maximally flexible civil commitment, institutional treatment, and step-down treatment standards that allow for appropriate commitment and treatment of individuals with mental illness who pose a danger to others or are living on the streets and cannot care for themselves. That's section 2. So, like, civil commitment, we should probably explain for just a second, but essentially that's like, I'm going to give my take on this, but it's essentially saying, like, we want to go back to the days where we could just say, hey, this is a person is crazy, and without their consent or without their need for any type of consent, being able to commit them to an institution against their will. is kind of what we're talking about here in that section.
There was a book by Foucault called Madness and Civilization, I think. And he talks about this shift where from leprosy and plague management to institutionalization of madness, and how it's actually a way to manage the poor and the disruptive and the politically inconvenient. And it just seems like that. Like there was a sentence you read there where you said something about people being a threat to society or something. Like it offset it. Like I was like, what? That could be like Obama, according to Trump. Like, you know.
So it says commitment of individuals with mental illness who pose a risk to themselves or to the public or are living on the streets and cannot care for themselves in appropriate facilities for appropriate periods of time. The interesting thing to me there is the way that that's worded. It could mean it. So this whole thing, right, is talking about America's streets, but the way that specific section is worded has nothing to do with anyone being on the street. It's like all of these are or statements. So someone is declared mentally ill and a risk to the public, right? According to who? Like who's making that determination?
We got the most mentally ill person that I'm ready to get rid of. And he's sitting in the office, okay.
Like maybe it's also worth talking about what executive orders do in terms of the power of wielding the federal government. On the one hand, it seems like executive orders are just another form of the presidential soapbox for a president to make a declaration and for it to seem really official. And, you know, the language at the beginning, by the power vested in me by the Constitution, all this stuff. We're taught that we have a system of checks and balances and that the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch are all equally powerful branches that check each other. That's not actually how the system has developed. The bloat of the executive branch is enormous. The amount of influence that these executive orders have on federal agencies with billions of dollars at their disposal. Just think about the huge ICE budget now that can be directed because of the executive branch. They don't need congressional approval to do any of this stuff. This is outside the legislative process. Your senators and Congress people have no say over these executive orders. The president can declare these things and agencies fall in line. And until the judicial branch does or doesn't do anything about it, they're going to keep using whatever language is in these executive orders to do whatever they want to do. And this administration has already shown that they're perfectly willing to ignore judicial orders that try to limit their powers, right? That's already been a precedent set by this administration. So we're in tyranny land. We're not in any sort of controllable democracy with these executive orders. This is what tyrants do. They make up their mind about something and then they tell their lackeys to go do it. That's what this is.
Yeah. And I mean, that's been the whole argument from like the Heritage Foundation and their whole thing, right? Like it's the unitary executive theory, basically, that the president is the CEO of America and can just do basically whatever they want and they can rule through executive order. And just like you said, Joe, until the judicial does something about it or puts an injunction against some of these things, like people are going to do it. And that was, I think we talked about this on an episode, but that was the whole birthright citizenship case that went up to the Supreme Court recently. Everyone was calling it birthright citizenship, but really it was more like judicial, like nationwide injunction capability of certain judges, right? Like, because they were trying to essentially put a pause on certain executive orders and actions from the president across the entire United States at the federal level. And that went up to the Supreme Court, and basically they're saying like they don't have the power to do that. And now it's got to go all back to what is it, like a class action lawsuit, or like Congress has to go and do this thing. So yeah, it just takes that entire check out of it from anyone except for the Supreme Court pretty much at that point. So yeah, I agree, Joe. What different is it than a decree from a king?
Right. And like people say, I've heard this so many times from average conservative people who mean well and who just want to have a predictable world to live in. Oh, I think the country should be run like a business because we have this propaganda about businesses as being reasonable ways to organize people. But a business is like small form tyranny. You know, that's what a CEO is. They can say whatever they want and everybody falls in line. And this is what happens when you get that theory in action. This is what happens. Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that these executive orders, I don't know, part of me wants to just make fun of them for how silly they sound and how ridiculous it is, but also I'm trying to remind myself just how much power and how many resources are behind these, like how many people are going to suffer because of this executive order in particular. There are different levels of society, different classes and everything, and the lumpen proletariat is like the form of the working class that includes like unhoused people and prostitutes and people that society just sort of ostracizes and views as disposable. And this executive order seems designed particularly towards that lowest of the lowest class to punish and make those people suffer.
The ones that have no recourse, no real way to fight back.
The top there, Joe, too, you pointed out like the language that, it's like he says, like, by the power vested in me by the Constitution and the laws, whatever that is. And it's like, yeah, it's so convenient for you to like bring it up now and to like use it as a source of authority. But like, meanwhile, they're like trying to hollow it out and they're all trying to fight it. And they're like exploiting all the amendments and bypassing due process. It's like, it's classic theater. And I think you're totally right, too, with like the whole forced labor thing. Like it's trending in that direction.
Please stay tuned for a word from our sponsors. In today's world, old civics won't cut it. That's why Veritas Press, the nation's leader in patriotic curriculum, proudly introduces Civics for Order, our new K-12 series aligned with Executive Order 14097.
Gone are the days of messy debates about rights. Our kids learn that the Constitution is a living document, and it lives to serve authority.
My class read the consent to the governed, why you shouldn't need it. Then we practiced how to stand still when the drone lights turned red.
From community compliance coloring books to Founding Fathers' top 10 tactical moments, our program teaches the 3 branches of government: enforce, suppress, and protect image.
Now when my son hears sirens, he doesn't hide, he salutes.
Order isn't natural, it's taught. Make sure your kids learn early.
Not accredited. Curriculum may contain selective history, loyalty oaths, and depictions of founding fathers in riot gear. Use under government supervision only.
All right, so now we're moving on to Section 3. It's Fighting Vagrancy on America's Streets is what this is called. The Attorney General and Secretary of Health and Human Services, the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, and the Secretary of Transportation shall take immediate steps to assess their discretionary grant programs and determine whether priority for these grants may be given to grantees in states and municipalities that actively meet the below criteria to the maximum extent permitted. Enforced prohibitions on open illicit drug use, enforce prohibitions on urban camping and loitering, enforce prohibitions on urban squatting, enforce, where necessary, adopt standards that address individuals who are a danger to themselves or others and suffer from serious mental illness or substance use disorder, or who are living on the streets and cannot care for themselves through assisted outpatient treatment, or by moving into treatment centers or other appropriate facilities, via civil commitment or other available means to the maximum extent permitted by law, or substantially implement and comply with. This is the one that doesn't make sense to me, or I'm trying to understand what's going on here, but or substantially implement and comply with, to the extent required, the registration and notification obligations of the Sex Offender Registry and Notification Act, particularly in the case of registered sex offenders with no fixed address, including by adequately mapping and checking the location of homeless sex offenders. The Attorney General shall ensure that homeless individuals arrested for federal crimes are evaluated consistent with 18 U.S.C. 4248 to determine whether they are sexually dangerous persons, and certified accordingly for civil commitment. Take all necessary steps to ensure that availability of funds under the Emergency Federal Law Enforcement Assistance Program to support consistent blah, blah, blah. This is just talking about, consistent with 34 U.S.C. 50101, encampment removal efforts in areas for which public safety is a risk and state and local resources are inadequate. Assess federal resources to determine whether they may be directed toward ensuring, to the extent permitted by law, the detainees with serious mental illness are not released into the public because of lack of forensic bed capacity at appropriate local, state, and federal jails or hospitals, and enhanced requirements that prisons and residential reentry centers that are under the authority of the Attorney General or receive funding from the Attorney General require in-custody housing release plans to the maximum extent practicable, require individuals to comply. I'm just thinking if I want to read through all of this.
Do you want to tag team it?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah,
We're at
section-
section 4 right now.
Yeah, I can take Section 4 and Section 5. Section 4, redirecting federal resources toward effective methods of addressing homelessness. The Secretary of Health and Human Services shall take appropriate action to 1. Ensure that discretionary grants issued by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration for Substance Use Disorder Prevention, Treatment, and Recovery fund evidence-based programs and do not fund programs that fail to achieve adequate outcomes, including so-called harm reduction or safe consumption efforts that only facilitate illegal drug use and its attendant harm. 2. Provide technical assistance to assisted outpatient treatment programs for individuals with serious mental illness or addiction during or after the civil commitment process, focused on shifting such individuals off of the streets and public programs and into private housing and support networks. And 3. Ensure that federal funds for federally qualified health centers and certified community behavioral health clinics reduce rather than promote homelessness by supporting, to the maximum extent permitted by law, comprehensive services for individuals with serious mental illness and substance use disorder, including crisis intervention services. And B, the Attorney General shall prioritize available funding to support the expansion of drug courts and mental health courts for individuals for which such diversion serves public safety. Oof. Yeah. So the thing that's on my mind when I'm reading that part is we have no, like on the local, state, federal level, we have no meaningful emergency mental health services. You can't call 911 for a mental health professional. You call 911, you get a guy with a gun who did whatever training he did, and they're the people that handle mental health emergencies. So those are the organizations that are going to be put into action for all these things around the country. I just want to point that out.
Yeah, that is a good point to make. I think when I was listening to that, like there's some things in here that sound okay, right? Like, but they're just so generic in the way that it's worded. But the one that kind of stuck out to me is, I think this was in the part I read right before. Let me see here. It was the section where it was talking about basically, there it is. It's moving them into treatment centers or other appropriate facilities. That was one of the things that, like, what is the other appropriate facility in this scenario? And then, Joe, from that section that you read, they're talking about harm reduction, safe consumption, and they're saying, like, they only want to do this or the way it's worded in here is basically saying, like, that these programs fail to achieve the outcomes that they're looking for. And it's like, well, these harm reduction things have been proven to keep people from dying on the streets or spreading disease, anything that can be spread through needle sharing, right? By having clean needles and things like that. So if these programs are actually achieving harm reduction, then what is the outcome that they want to see, I guess, is my question and what I'd be interested in figuring out there.
I think Arthur mentioned Foucault earlier, who also wrote a book in English. I think they call it Discipline and Punish. I think that's more in line with what the purpose of all of this is. It's like a morality thing. Like they don't want to condone in any way habits that are morally inferior. They want to punish them and use them as excuses for cheap, free labor, which is what they're going to do.
Yep.
I thought it would be really funny if there were like funny, but informative, if there were like an honest trailer version of these executive orders. Because like one of the lines here in the section is like, the executive order says like, the Attorney General, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, the Secretary of Housing, the Secretary... And it's like Pam Bondi, Trump's fixer, RFK, the super healthy guy, Scott Turner, the NFL quarterback, Sean Duffy, the MTV superstar. Like, let's be real about who these people are and stop relying on like a title that they have just because they were forced down the throat and were like confirmed.
Yeah.
You have the perfect voice for the Honest Trailers narrator, by the way. So you could crush that, I think.
It's summer. Yeah.
Do you want to keep reading?
Yeah, we might as well
Section
finish
5
this
looks
out.
big.
Yeah.
Okay. I can try to do it fast but still relatively coherent. We'll see. Section 5, increasing accountability and safety in America's homelessness programs. A, the Secretary of Health and Human Services and the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development shall take appropriate actions to increase accountability in the provision of and grants awarded for homelessness assistance and transitional living programs. These actions shall include, to the extent permitted by law, ending support for housing first policies that deprioritize accountability and fail to promote treatment, recovery, and self-sufficiency, increasing competition among grantees through broadening the applicant pool and holding grantees to higher standards of effectiveness in reducing homelessness and increasing public safety. B. The Secretary of Housing and Urban Development shall, as appropriate, take steps to require recipients of federal housing and homelessness assistance to increase requirements that persons participating in the recipient's program who suffer from substance use disorder or serious mental illness use substance abuse treatment or mental health services as a condition of participation. C. With respect to recipients of federal housing and homelessness assistance that operate drug injection sites or quote-unquote safe consumption sites, knowingly distribute drug paraphernalia or permit the use or distribution of illicit drugs on property under their control, the Attorney General shall review whether such recipients are in violation of federal law and bring civil or criminal actions in appropriate cases. And the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, in coordination with the Attorney General, shall review whether such recipients are in violation of the terms of the programs pursuant to which they receive federal housing and homelessness assistance and freeze their assistance as appropriate. The Secretary of Housing and Urban Development shall take appropriate measures and revise regulations as necessary to allow, where permissible under applicable law, federally funded programs to exclusively house women and children and to stop sex offenders who receive homelessness assistance through such programs from being housed with unrelated children. E. The Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, in consultation with the Attorney General and Secretary of Health and Human Services, shall, as appropriate, to the extent permitted by law, allow or require the recipients of federal funding for homelessness assistance to collect health-related information that the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development identifies as necessary to the effective and efficient operation of the funding program from all persons to whom such assistance is provided, and require those funding recipients to share such data with law enforcement authorities in circumstances permitted by law, and to use the collected health data to provide appropriate medical care to individuals with mental health diagnoses or to connect individuals to public health resources. Jesus Christ. Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of that shit made me sick.
The fact that they're trying to get rid of housing first, it's like there's actually evidence. It's evidence-based, and it does work. Because in Eugene, we have like a disproportionate amount of homeless. It's almost like, this is where the fact-checking is going to come in. But it was like 400 out of every 100,000 people in Eugene, as opposed to like Oregon, it was like 300 and change per 100,000. So it's like, it's slightly higher. Well, I'm sure proportionally it's actually a lot higher. But housing first, like I remember reading up on it because Denver did some study too in San Diego. And it actually saves money because it reduces the amount of ER visits and ambulance rides and police interventions. And the retention of like housing was like 80 to 90% for like a year or two. It was really high. So it's really sad. And it's sad that they're framing it as like a moral failure. It reminds me of like the BP, like carbon footprint thing, like just putting it on an individual and trying to just like wash your hands of it, even though it is like housing first is effective and it actually saves tax dollars.
It's almost like the housing is a root cause of
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's open up Mar-a-Lago and see how many people could actually live in Mar-a-Lago. Like thousands probably.
Yeah.
When I go through, like I visit my dad in California and there's like these just giant hotels. I just think like this could house thousands.
There's that whole argument during COVID too, like all of the empty office buildings in cities, since we have sufficient enough internet infrastructure that we can do most of our meetings remotely, and going to the office is actually redundant in most cases, and you could turn that into housing. It's ridiculous.
Totally.
It's ridiculous.
Abandoned malls. There's like so much. Yeah.
So really the root cause of homelessness is the cost of housing. When you have to pay to, what are the basic needs for a human being? Shelter, clothing, food. You have to pay what, like $2,000 a month for a 1-bedroom apartment in most cities now? Like what?
And instead of using that for housing, all the companies are forcing everyone to go back to work in the office so that they can make sure that all the businesses that, count on people being there every day continue to run and make money, right? Can't save money by staying at home and not using gas and not eating out for lunch and all of those things.
Yeah. I'm sure I'll want to say a bunch about this when we start talking about the next book, The Dawn of Everything, but I was just kind of having a conversation with my family the other day about just like the scale of human history, like how long human beings have been living successfully on this planet, and like the conservative guess is like 200,000 years-ish. Most of what we know is recorded history is like 6,000 years ago, 6 to 8,000 years ago until now. And I kind of want to do like a timeline on the ground, like measure it out. If every 1,000 years is 1 inch and you just measure out a timeline, the whole history of humanity is like 200,000 years. That's like 17 feet or 18 feet when you stretch it out. And recorded history is like 6 inches or 7 inches out of that 17 feet. And for all that we've been living, we've been building structures, we've been having communities, we've been having societies on a small scale anyway, successfully for that whole 200,000 years. And now all of a sudden, this thing called homelessness is something that's a huge problem we have to fix. What's really the cause of that problem? It's this stupid system we've created where everything costs money just to exist. Like, we could do it better. We could do it a lot better.
That's really cool. I would love to do an episode on the history of when was rent invented and what is the concept of rent and all these things that we're paying. Because totally right. Like, that's really cool.
One of the co-authors of the book has another book, and I think it's called like Debt, the First 5,000 Years or something like that. But yeah, he's really into thinking about it in ways like, I don't know, I find it really appealing as a way of looking.
Check that out. All right. Let's see. Anything else on that we kind of want to talk through? I think we hit on all the big parts, like the safe consumption sites, like not actually addressing
the data sharing, maybe. There's just a lot of stuff about just requiring tons and tons and tons of data sharing. And we've talked before about how it seems like harmless just to give some information to authorities, but they aggressively collect information about people for a good reason. Like, the more they know about people, the more they can control them.
Well, the other thing that made me think about in here too was, the rhetoric around LGBTQ, anyone that's on that spectrum having a mental health condition. And then like, this is also talking about being able to institutionalize anyone with a mental health condition that poses risk to themselves or others. And then it talks specifically about like sexual offenders and like tracking those people. And that's why to me, the thing where everything is an or statement, like is it's easy to kind of just like look at that and not think about it, but like there's a reason everything is an or statement, right? Oh, you don't need to be homeless, but you need to have a mental health condition, and then we can now involuntarily commit you to this institution. Oh, there's no beds, there's no place in your local state, so what's the appropriate location? Well, we can send you to this place in Florida that we just built, or any one of these others that they're giving FEMA money, like $600 million worth of FEMA money to different states to build more detention camps, right? Like, I don't know. Maybe that's a bit conspiracy-ish, but
no,
I think totally.
Dude, it's all.
The or covers both.
Yeah. No, that's like basic Boolean logic, right? Or versus and. Like, if it's an or, it includes more. Like, yeah. Go ahead, Arthur.
Yeah. You're not a threat to yourself, but you're a threat to me, and you got to go.
Right. Or you're a threat to the children, right? Just like we talked about yesterday or last week, right?
Or a threat to the property value. Heaven forbid.
Yeah.
No, we joked about it before, but there's like, in this Trump term, there's already been a precedent for like, I forgot what they called it. It's like anti-Trump hysteria or something. There was like some official mental illness that was like, you hate Trump. They were trying to prop up. Like, sure, call it a conspiracy theory, but if it'll work, they'll do it.
Yeah, RFK said that everybody with ADHD and like neurodivergence should be in a camp, so they're going widespread on this.
That gives me, and the best idea for protesting this stuff is for hundreds of thousands of us just to prop up tents on federal property and just camp out. Just make it a massive, massive camp out. Yeah, it had to be a lot of people to work, but still.
I like that idea. I wonder if we could build that up. Maybe, I don't know. We'll have to find who's doing a lot of the DC protest or organizing. Is it Cliff Cash? Maybe we can get him. I think he's set up like 4 or 5 protests down there so far. And yeah, so I guess we'll see where that goes. I'm assuming that some court is going to try and put some sort of hold on this if it's class action lawsuit or something, basically because we're talking about rolling back protections against people being involuntarily committed and basically making that policy again. So I'm sure this will have some sort of legal battles here, but I think, like Joe, to your point earlier, even if it does have legal battles, like as of right now, they're going to move forward with this, right? Until someone says to stop, and even then they might keep going depending on what court that is. So yeah, I don't have anything funny to end this with. This is just kind of
The last line of the executive order is kind of funny and petty. It says the costs for publication of this order shall be borne by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Is that part of it? Like, why?
Like, is that like, how much is it? Like, yeah, there's got to be something there I'm not understanding, because like publication of this order, it's just like, do they have to do something more than putting it on the website? Do they need to actually put out printouts of this and tack it up on the town hall wall or something? Is that the way this becomes official?
I just feel like they're like, it's just constant embezzlement. They're like, how much did that cost to publicize? And they're like, I don't know, 20 million. And then they're just like, it goes into an account that you never see again.
Yeah, it's fair. Speaking of petty, well, not petty embezzlement, I don't know if this is true. So this is conspiracy theory time. I guess we'll need a button for that, or just like speculation or something. But saw the thing about Donald Trump saying that Coca-Cola was going to use sugar, like pure sugar, for American soda from like American sugar manufacturers, because it turns out like his buddy owns like one of the biggest like sugar manufacturers in the Dominican Republic, and that's why he was like pushing for that. So I'll fact check that one. But like, yeah, just like anytime it's like, wow, that's a really dumb thing. Why did they come out and do that? And then it's just like, oh, because somebody's gonna make a shit ton of money off of it. Yeah.
Government run like a business, baby.
Yep. So effective. So effective. Please stay tuned for a word from our sponsors.
At Faith First Banking, we believe in 2 things, capital and consequence. That's why we created the Coup Dividend Account, the nation's only savings program that rewards faith and partisan retribution.
I used to tithe to the church. Now I tithe to the defense fund.
I moved my money to Faith First, and within a week, I got a 5% yield every time the president said Obama committed treason. By Friday, I bought a second F-150.
Every dollar you deposit helps fund legal crusades against America's enemies. Former presidents, college professors, librarians. We've got a slush fund for justice and a direct debit to divine vengeance.
And it's not just returns, it's rewards. I got a platinum coup card. It waives ATM fees and moral uncertainty.
Join the thousands of faithful patriots turning outrage into income. With Faith First, treason is no longer a threat. It's a financial opportunity.
Dividends may fluctuate with poll numbers. Terms not FDIC insured. Offer void in states with competent prosecutors.
Hey, that's going to close out our episode for today. If you enjoy the show, please follow, subscribe. You can set us up for automatic downloads on your favorite podcasting service. All these things, along with submitting reviews or ratings for the show, help the algorithm pick us up so that more people can see us. So thank you for the support, and we will continue the conversation on Thursday with our main topic for this week.